Hello. Welcome to Group Chat, a webinar series from the Next Gen Public Media Initiative at the Joan Ganz Cooney Center at Sesame Workshop. In these webinars, we bring together teens and adults for conversations about media and technology in the lives of young people. And I'm your host, Dwight Dunston. So glad to be with you. We have four wonderful guests joining us today. Two of our amazing Next Gen Public Media Youth Fellows, and we have two researchers who are going to have the chance in just a moment to introduce themselves. But in terms of introduction, we'll have folks just go around, share your name, where you're calling from, and for our adult experts, if you can just share a little bit about the work you do in the world. And our youth fellows, we're going to ask you to just name something that you're interested in studying. So how about we start with Audrey?
Hi, I'm Audrey. I'm calling in from Virginia.
Beautiful. And we'll go next to Gabby. We'll just share our name and something you're interested in studying.
Hi, my name's Gabby Rodriguez. I'm calling in from Philadelphia, and I'm currently interested studying film and media production along with art therapy.
Awesome. And Audrey, we didn't give you the chance to share one thing you're interested in studying.
I'm interested in studying business.
Beautiful. And we'll go over to Monica.
Hey everyone, I'm Monica Anderson. I'm the Associate Director of the Internet and Tech team at Pew Research Center. So we are located in Washington, D.C. So I mainly do public opinion surveys, but also social media analysis around tech topics. So we study everything from social media and teens to online activism to things like online dating and driverless cars. And I've been at the center for 12 years now.
Beautiful. Thank you, Monica. And last but not least, Joan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joan Mukogosi, and I am a research analyst on the health and data team at Data and Society. I'm calling in from Brooklyn, New York, and my background is in student activism and the sociology of expertise. Right now I'm working on some qualitative research projects that examine tech and data through the lens of COVID, essential work, and trust. I'm really excited to talk with you all today.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for those introductions. I'm so glad to have each of you here. And to get started, we're going to enter a segment called How I See It. And so in this segment, we're going to either engage with a quote, a clip, some data, and then have a conversation from each of your different vantage points. We have experts who have done years of research. We have young people with different interests and different passions, but also some lived experiences to add to the conversation. And so the invitation is really just to share from your perspective how you see it with your different lens on, different hat on. And after some crosstalk, we'll then show the next clip. So let's start with our first clip. We'll give folks a minute to read this to themselves, and then I'll just read it out loud. So, from Paula Derlovsky, we have the quote, "An ideal e-tribe should nourish your passions, interests, and curiosities. As with your relationships or circles in real life, your e-tribe should be supportive, welcoming, non-judgmental, and non-critical." So I want to start with Joan. Just from your perspective, how do you see that? How do you see it?
How do I see it? I think that's a lovely quote. And I think, I definitely strive to have really fulfilling community online. But what it makes me think of is the report that we produced through Data and Society called The Unseen Teen, where we spoke with designers of different social media platforms. And what we found is that online spaces aren't often designed with young people in mind, which means that it's in order to build communities that are fulfilling, young people have to do extra work to sort of make platforms work for them. And so I think about that, reading that quote, that communities that are fulfilling and bring joy to young people are things that young people have to build themselves. They're not necessarily built into platforms.
Thank you, Joan. Over to Gabby. Gabby, any thoughts on how you see that?
I definitely agree. A lot of platforms, I think, online are not suited for conversations or big group chats. I have so many different like online platforms for so many different group chats or just environments just to get like I guess the enjoyment that I want to. The biggest thing is like Discord. I feel like that's like the biggest like community based thing that was made for like gaming, but it has become such a big thing to just make big group chats where you can FaceTime call, but a lot of social media platforms aren't suited for that. And Instagram honestly sucks for like group chats and just like connecting with one another. But also with online, I feel like there's a lot of good things because you can reach so many people. And you do create those different communities, whether you're communicating directly with the people or whether that's just like liking a post. So it's always nice to kind of find a group of people that have your same interest, whether you talk or not, but you kind of have like similar likes and interests with each other.
Thank you, Gabby. Over to you, Audrey. Any thoughts on that quote? How do you see it?
How I see it is, I think that communities online are so important to young people. If anything, I think they've been more important to young people than previous generations since we kind of grew up with it. And during COVID, that's how we all connected together as a generation, and we still had a sense of self of our generation, even though we weren't seeing each other in person. But I also think it's kind of difficult sometimes because, like you're saying, a lot of communities aren't really built to be super easy to form communities, and I think a lot of that is there's almost competition to be a certain way online, and you kind of have to hide who you actually are. And some people, there's a lot of negativity in communities, which can make it difficult.
Yeah. Thank you, Audrey. And last but not least, Monica, curious how you see it.
Yeah, so from some of the work that we've done in previous studies of teens, this sentiment comes up both in our survey work and work that we've done with focus groups. So in 2018, we did a survey of teens asking about whether they thought social media had had a mostly positive effect on people their age or mostly negative. And we saw pretty much split, pretty kind of even shares said positive or negative. For those who said negative, they talked a lot about this idea of things like online harassment and cyberbullying. Some of the ideas that both Gabby and Audrey spoke to as well. This idea that you have to present yourself a certain way, that you need to post things that gets a lot of likes, that it's not necessarily reality. But on the positive side, you saw a lot of teens talk about it allows them to connect with friends and family. It gives them a place to be creative and to allow them to express themselves, and also as a way to get involved with issues that they care about and stay informed. So, when we talk a lot about kind of teens and kind of what's going on with youth, is really important for us to hear directly from teens themselves. And I think that gives us a more nuanced look at kind of both the good sides and the bad sides when it comes to teens and technology.
Thank you. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, everyone. So we are going to move on to our second clip or piece of text. I think we have another article. This one from 2022. I'll give folks a moment to take a look. And so we're hoping our audience has had enough time to take this in, and we're going to hop to our panelists. And this time we're going to start with Monica here.
So this graphic is from a report that we just released last week. Earlier this summer, we did a survey of teens in the US where we asked a lot of different questions. These specifically focused on the changing landscape of social media. One of the things that's really kind of important through all the work that we've done over the years around teens and social media is just how quickly environments shift, where people are spending their time, how much time they're spending, and the idea that teens are getting different things out of different platforms. And, one of the kind of most striking things that we found in this survey, which perhaps is not necessarily surprising to those out there, is just how quickly in the span of less than a decade, Facebook's dominance has really fallen among teens. So back in our survey that we did in 2015, the share of teens who said that they use Facebook was 71%. When we asked that same question again earlier this year, that number was 32%. On the flip side, you've seen a lot of rise in terms of teens who say they use Instagram and use Snapchat, TikTok, which was not necessarily around back when we surveyed teens in the 2014-2015 survey, is actually used by about 70% of teens. And YouTube is nearly universal when it comes to the types of platforms teens use. And I think it's really kind of important to, as we think about social media generally, to be able to disaggregate and look at which platforms are used more widely and how that might shift over time.
Thank you, Monica. We're going to bop over to Audrey. When you look at this, and just curious from your perspective, how you see it, how you make sense of this.
I was thinking that what's notable is I think that a little bit like we were talking before, I think that media is moving more towards being super, personalized, which allows people to be more connected and find exactly what they really want to use media for. And less towards more platforms that are like Facebook that might be sorry, more. I feel like when I think of Facebook and me and my friends too, I think of it like both keeping track of your family and as well as political, and I think that kids aren't really into that as much as adults are. Instead, we're switching to apps that are more, I feel like, friendly, like Snapchat, which is more casual.
Thank you, Audrey. Bop over to Gabby. Gabby, how do you see it?
Yeah, no, I don't use Facebook. So this graph makes so much sense to me because all of the things that are very high up there is everything that I personally use the most, except Snapchat. Snapchat and Instagram had this weird thing going back and forth where Instagram was kind of taking what Snapchat was having with stories because it's based on you see how the social media platforms kind of jump off of each other once you see teens interacting with it a lot. And since Snapchat had that cool story feature, then Instagram started having that cool story feature. But all of these things I use all the time. I think Facebook or Twitter is just not as it's interactive, but it's not as useful to teens to kind of interact with their friends. And I mean, personally, I don't use Facebook a lot. That's just my thing. Whenever I think of it, I think of oh, that's something that my parents use. That's not something that I use. No offense, but that's just my take on those things. I just feel like it all depends on how much you can get out of the platform. I feel like Instagram and TikTok are very universal. A lot of people have started businesses on there. A lot of youth have started becoming youth creators on there. Same with Instagram, and YouTube is the ultimate if you want to become a YouTuber, you can type of thing, or post vlogs. So it's you see all of these things kind of pop up from all of those different social media platforms, and it's kind of like, what's the most popular to us?
Thank you, Gabby. And then over to Joan. Joan, how do you see it?
Yeah, this is really fascinating research. I also I was in high school in 2014 and 2015, and so I witnessed like the rise and the downfall of Facebook firsthand. It was really popular, and now through this research, it's less popular amongst teenagers. But what I see is that that's a lot of platforms and algorithms to manage for young people. Switching between these different platforms means switching between different ways of receiving content and also navigating different digital spaces. And when we were conducting our research, asking people who build platforms about their process and what they're considering, it made us wonder a lot about the flip side, the people using these platforms after they're built. And so, yeah, I think this is really fascinating. It shows that young people, teenagers, are sort of navigating different, not just different platforms, but through that, different sort of algorithms, different ways of being online. And I think that that's honestly like a really cool form of knowledge. So a really cool skill. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to maybe hold just a little bit more time here if there's any last, because the conversation is just bubbling up, and I think it'll continue to grow and grow as we look at more things to see from our unique perspectives and expertise. But any last thoughts on this graphic?
I was thinking that there's definitely, in the new forms of social media, a trend towards platforms that are more fast-paced and interesting. And I think that that's really where teens are finding their place, especially since a lot of times social media is a main source of entertainment for us, when in other generations it might not have been.
Yeah, thank you for that. Wow. So I think we're ready for our next either clip or article for us to engage with. Yes. So we're going to have folks take a moment to look at this, and then we'll see exactly how we see it. So I want to start with Gabby here. Gabby, how do you see it?
The numbers are everywhere. So I think I'm still trying to wrap my head around like this graph as well. But just from the title, like older teens are more likely like than younger teens to like say it's hard to give up social media. I think I agree with that the most. I think as I was growing up, I was more like confused on what social media had for me, and like I didn't really use it at a young age. I think if we like do this again or something like that and the new generation starts getting on social media, because I see my cousins getting on social media so young now, when me as I was growing up I got into it like around like fourth or fifth grade, but now you see people in like kindergarten getting on social media. But I think as your understanding of social media grows, I definitely would think it's harder for me to get off than like someone who's younger than me, because I personally, my whole life is in social media at this point. Kind of like I guess the way that I perceive myself to people is on social media, like my business, my art and everything, and kind of like all these friendships I've grown is also on social media. So it would be hard for me to detach that. But that's just kind of how I see, I guess, this whole thing.
Thank you, Gabby. Monica, I want to bring it over to you. How do you see this, especially given the work and where this is coming from?
Yeah, sure. So this is another graphic from the reports that, in addition to looking at which platforms are the most popular among teens, we wanted to ask some attitudinal questions. And one of the questions we asked teens was, how hard or easy would it be for you to give up social media? And we see that it's pretty much split down the line. So 54% of teens say it would be hard, 46% said it would be easy. One of the things that I think is really interesting is how kind of the age of teens plays into this. So, for older teens, so those that are 15 to 17 in our survey, they're more likely than younger teens to say that it would be harder for them to give up. So 60% say this. And so, there's also some demographic differences around a little bit around gender. There's also some big differences when it comes to how often teens are using social media. So, for teens who say that they're using these social media sites almost constantly, about 70% say it's harder to give up. So, what we see is the more you use social media, the more that you identify as someone who's more constantly on these platforms, the harder it is for you to say that it gives up. So I think this is also one of the things where it's really helpful to kind of look at how this might differ by teens in terms of demographics, but also in terms of frequency of use.
Yeah, that really resonates with me a lot. When I was younger, I never really used social media, so I wasn't really something I guess I would say I was addicted to, but now that I'm older and I do use social media, it would be really, really difficult for me to stop. And part of that, I think, is just like it's really overstimulating to always be online. So, in comparison, other activities seem sort of dull, which just makes you keep coming back. And also, I feel like I have a sense of responsibility to keep posting or like keep up with everything, even though a lot of times everything's really repetitive. Like, if you go onto TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, you're only gonna see things that you've already seen before, basically. It's like people's photos, like a cool video or something, but it's really seems like it's all the same content. But even though that's true, it's just, like, really hard to give up still.
Joan, want to make some space for you, and also if there's any questions folks are generating from comments that someone else might have shared, want to make some space for that as well.
Yeah, I'm just soaking it all in. This is really fascinating. And I think, Audrey, your last point again speaks to this idea that your experience on platforms, everyone's experience on platforms, um, is in some part dictated by algorithms and the way the platforms show you content. As you were saying, this sort of like cookie cutter or like the same content over and over and over again. I will say, like, to this point of like giving up social media, I think like part of the nuance here is that, social media, like, just turning it off, I feel like doesn't encompass like the capacity for both joy and like pain and like all the different uses that social media has in our lives. I think that there's that level of I don't know. It's kind of complicated what platforms can bring you. I wonder, yeah, if Gabby or Audrey, you could speak to those, I guess, like dual sides that giving up a platform, you might not want to do it because it's fun, or you might want to do it because it's really harmful. It can hold a lot of different things. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because a lot of times it feels like at first it feels fun, but then if you keep scrolling for a really long time, you kinda start to hate yourself for how much time you've wasted. Because like I was saying before, it feels like everything is fresh and new, even though it might not be. But also, there are really good things to it, like, I get a lot of my creative ideas from things like TikTok because I see other people doing things, and it gives me ideas to keep creating. I'm sure Gabby can relate to that a lot. And also the community aspect, which are the beneficial parts rather than the negative ones.
I think now I've been trying to find ways to detach myself from social media and just use it purely for like creative purposes, because I do a lot of like creative work where you kind of have to be on social media or promote yourself. I feel like social media is now like the big promotion for everyone to kind of be on, especially myself. And I had this incident where it's like I realized I should possibly maybe get myself out of social media when my Instagram was hacked one time and I was sobbing. And then I like took a step back because I was on the phone with my partner and he was like, "Why are you sobbing over Instagram? You can make a new one." And I was like, "That's so true." I think like personally for me, it's turned into more of like what Audrey was saying, with was like a repetitive and can be sort of negative. I've had like my sister, I've had friends tell me like they're taking a break off of social media because it's just so overwhelming. And I know for me, it can also be overwhelming, especially when you have big, like, I feel like it gets the most overwhelming when big political trends come into play, or big trends overall that create a lot of like debates between people. And that's when I actually like turn off my phone and I don't interact with anyone. I don't post anything on my story because it's so much going on with like, this is how one person feels, this is how another person feels, and one person comments and then it's a whole blow up on social media. So there's a lot of like negatives, and I'm definitely trying, I think as I get older, to really detach myself and kind of enjoy life a bit more outside of just my phone than just like being on there all the time and being like consumed by it. It doesn't really make me feel good. So
Um,
Oh.
sorry, can I go? Gabby, I was wondering, so I basically completely distanced myself from the political part because I feel like that is pretty stressful and you never really get anywhere arguing with anyone. But I was wondering, so sometimes I do try to sort of limit it, but I feel like for me it's either like I quit completely or I like can't basically have balance. So do you think it's worked for you to only have a little bit for your marketing or whatever?
like be on social media for a little bit to just like it definitely works for me, and I think it's because like I do art, and like nowadays for artists it's really easy to kind of post it and get that platform. But besides that, like I use my Instagram just to connect with like high school friends that are, I guess, like high school friends that are I don't talk to outside of high school. And just like purely like posting for media, especially since I do a lot of media work, and then visual art because I do visual artwork. And besides that, if stuff gets too overwhelming, I'm just like, I'm not on Instagram today. I'm good. So I think for me it's worked, but I think it depends on just like the team and also like the person.
Yeah, we're having some. We're going to stay on this point because we're having this beautiful conversation where Monica and Joan are bringing in your expertise and things that you've researched and different conversations that you've maybe had with study groups and focus groups. And Gabby and Audrey, you're bringing in, right, what's the role of this with the art that I make or my social life, and how do I step away when things actually get too tense or hard or stressful? So just naming the conversation around relationship to social media. Is it easy to step away, hard to step away, and the why of why I use social media as much as we do is just very generative. So Monica, I saw you come off to share.
Yeah, so in addition to the survey that we did this year, we also did focus groups of teens to just learn a little bit more about their own perspective. And as we're kind of talking a little bit about kind of politics and political discourse on social media, those topics definitely came up in our focus groups as both a way for social media to be involved politically. A lot of teens talked about being involved with Black Lives Matter, promoting issues that they really care about, really kind of finding those communities, finding where you can go to in-person rallies. But at the same time, we also got the same teens talking about feeling worn out about all of the political discussion, feeling fatigued, feeling like you're just going around in circles talking about the same thing, but nothing is actually happening. So again, it kind of speaks to the nuance and the both sides of this, where we heard from one teen in particular. She was kind of very vocal and active politically on social media, and thought about it as a way that without social media, she would not have that kind of two-way communication to meet people and to express herself. But at the same time, she talked about having to disengage and kind of back off on it because it was getting too much, particularly with folks who disagreed, whether it's people in her family, and how those online communications do turn into offline confrontation. So, I think that's another thing to keep in mind too, that the conversations that you may have, particularly around politics, could be heated, but it doesn't mean that it just necessarily just stays on social media.
I like what you said about it not just being, I wasn't thinking about the aspect of activism, but I think that's also been really important to our generation, like you said, with Black Lives Matter.
Any other thoughts on this? How folks are seeing it? Wow, is yeah, from many different lenses, but also I hear some shared lenses, or at least some experiences that then get affirmed through the research, through different ways that folks have studied the topic of the uses of social media. Maybe beyond the connecting, we're in the activism piece. Which, Joan, I know, I'm curious if you want to share any more about your research or things you've seen in your realm.
Yeah, I will say I got my start in digital activism, doing this exact work of sort of building activist networks online that translated to in-person gatherings as well. So yeah, it's something that I'm really passionate about. And I think just to add to this discussion, something important to acknowledge is that political activism or well-being or happiness online means something different to everybody. And I think that I'd be sort of interested to hear again from Gabby and Audrey, from your perspective, sort of what activism can look like. I think, there are, as I said, those online and offline transitions, but there's so many ways to be active online. And I wonder if you guys have encountered those or engaged in some of those things.
I was gonna say, for me, I I'm very active when it comes to youth activism and everything like that. I haven't participated much in it myself, but has helped spread the message of it. Especially when it came to, in my school, we had a walkout against my school for discrimination, and that whole thing was spread through social media and kind of starting the trend. Especially when you had the whole Roe versus Wade, everyone going to City Hall, everything was spread on social media and kind of sharing that out. So I feel like youth, especially now, I'm always in it and around it. It's so prominent on social media, and it's so the moment something comes up, it's shared in a group chat or it's shared on everyone's story. I swear I see the same thing on everyone's story when something big is happening or where there's a walkout or we have to go to City Hall. It's the same post on everyone's story or post that they're doing. And I think it's just been it's gotten so I don't know what, I forgot the word at this moment, but it's become such a big movement. I think using social media as a platform to kind of encourage youth activism or become a youth activist yourself.
Yeah, I think due to that, we've made huge strides towards things like equality and acceptance of people from all different backgrounds and things like that. And like Gabby, I haven't been super active in political activism online, except for helping spread the message, which is, I think, some of the most important parts, because if the message isn't spread, then no one's gonna see it anyway. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm appreciating Gabby and Audrey, just some of the personalized experiences with social media and activism, and really can't separate it myself from the broader questions or broader thoughts around digital media or youth digital culture, how this is all a part of digital culture. And Joan, I love what you said before. You know, you sort of, in graduating high school in 2014, you saw sort of the rise and fall of Facebook, right? And I think about how people were maybe political or embodying activism at that time in 2014, and maybe what are some of the things that folks were talking about and how were folks connecting around issues. And in 2022, Gabby and Audrey, folks are connecting in ways that you're seeing, whether it's the same story on many timelines on TikTok or different social medias, or the ways that even folks begin to get pitted against one another. It's all speaking to larger cultural trends, I think, around digital culture, youth digital culture, and activism. So any last thoughts on just that as we zoom out from the beautiful sharings from Gabby and Audrey? Monica, Joan, anything you want to say about or share about trends that you've seen?
I mean, I can just talk briefly about some of the work that we've done, not necessarily just teen focused, but like more kind of broadly with our adult population. It's just, I think that there was a lot of conversation on whether or not social media can have an impact politically, but I think we finally moved away from that. And I think something like conversations around Black Lives Matter and police brutality has really put that into perspective. And we see again that there are big demographic differences in those who say that those platforms are really important for them politically. It tends to be those who are Black or Hispanic are more likely to say that. And a lot of that conversation is around feeling like it gives them a voice that they wouldn't otherwise have. And so a lot of the work that we've done beyond surveys is kind of looking at the evolutions of hashtags, Black Lives Matter, for example, but also things like Me Too. So it is definitely a topic that, is near and dear to my heart. So love this kind of side of our conversation.
Nice. Not only I'll add that, thinking of, how platforms are built, activism online, doesn't just happen. And I think thinking of your point, Gabby, about I think what you're referencing is like the Instagram stories that are like the same thing over and over again, spreading like awareness about an issue. I think what I think about in those sort of repeated images is that that's a really good way to move information on those platforms. It's a really good way to use or to game the algorithm to spread something important. And so, yeah, again, I think that activism is just one way that you can see people sort of learning and adapting to platforms and the way that they're structured, the way that they're built, and sort of modifying them in ways that can make them work for them and the things that matter to them. And so, yeah, very, very fascinating.
Beautiful. So we're coming up to our last clip for this portion of How I See It. Thank you all for that, those sharings and that conversation. But we're going to play this last clip, and then we'll ask folks how they see it.
Breaking news! President Joe Biden has granted Ukraine another $40 billion in U.S. support as it continues to battle the Russian invasion. The legislation includes $20 billion in military assistance and $8 billion in general economic support. What do you think about this?
So I'm very curious, and I'm not going to curate it as much this time or facilitate it, but curious how folks see it. How did folks see that clip?
I can jump in real quick. That's how I get my news. I do not watch news stations. My mom has it on every morning, but do I pay attention? No. Am I on TikTok? Yes. So there's a lot of accounts on TikTok that are like that, where it's kind of like someone giving the news like really quick. I think that was like the funniest way that I've seen it on TikTok. And honestly, it just brings me back. Of course, that's the SpongeBob fish that gives the news on SpongeBob. And like, who wouldn't want to just stop and watch that? That made me crack up every time that I saw it. And honestly, that's just how I kind of get my information when it comes to, I think, serious things happening or just like minor things that are happening with, whether it's like with celebrities or like just something going on in like Philadelphia or something like that. Like I usually get all of my stuff on TikTok or Instagram, and it's easier for me, I think, if it's in a short time span and also something that's interesting, because if it doesn't like capture me in like the moment I'm looking at it, then I kind of just like slide past it. And for that, I would stay and watch the whole thing and then go on the account and then see every single thing and then probably learn something new. So
I do definitely get news from TikTok, and I think that a lot of us do because it's kind of unavoidable. But also, I feel like sometimes I'm skeptical of sources because you know how anyone can make a TikTok. So usually I like see something and then I like go down a rabbit hole and I usually look at articles online and things. But also, I listen to NPR a lot for my news. But I think that one really valuable aspect of TikToks like that is when you're like looking at articles online and there's comments or whatever, usually it's like not that many and not very like big focus on that. But on a TikTok, you can really see what everyone is thinking and different people's perspectives on it, which I think is really cool.
Monica or Joan, anything you want to add about how you see it?
I'm like trying not to die of laughter because I love the SpongeBob fish news. No, but I think, like, not to sound like a broken record, but platforms are not built for teenagers, which I think is so ironic given the creative and like hilarious content that teenagers produce every single day on platforms. And I think that that is, again, so amazing in light of the fact that young people are working in environments, like doing this on digital environments that are intentionally like harder for them to navigate. And in our report, we focused in on this strategy that people who build platforms use called strategic ignorance, which really boils down to, you know, collecting too much data or no data at all about populations that essentially like don't really matter to the platform designers, and so that happens with young people, not collecting data about age, or again collecting so much data that it's like impossible to moderate a content, and is therefore again difficult for young people to navigate. And when we thought about strategic ignorance, we also, on the flip side, were really fascinated with this idea of strategic knowledge, which we see when young people build this sort of like tacit knowledge, like through experience every day on these platforms about how to make them work for them. And I think that this is a really great example, Gabby, like with your reflection, like not really wanting to watch the news, but having this way to watch the news, which is fun and hilarious and a bit more lighthearted and works for you. I think that the SpongeBob fish news guy is a really great example of the strategic knowledge and the really like hilarious and fascinating ways that people push back against platforms that are again not designed for them. Yeah.
I have a question. I just want to
yeah.
know if Joan and Monica, would you guys like watch the SpongeBob news guy every day? If that was like a thing, if that was like a show, would you guys watch it?
Maybe if there were,
I
if there were
mean,
like,
you'd be surprised at like my kind of TV watching diet. So I really watch anything, including Love Island UK. So
I
Wow.
have another question.
Yes,
I was
Audrey.
wondering, Joan, so you're talking a lot about how platforms aren't built for young people. I was wondering, like what aspects that is and what a platform that was built for young people would look like?
That's such a great question. I might have to throw that second one back at you in terms of what those platforms would look like. And I will say, to protect the anonymity of the people that we talked to, we didn't get down to too many specifics about things that are sort of built and not built for teenagers, if that makes sense, to not identify the platforms that they were working with. But as I mentioned at the beginning, when building platforms, like essentially they have this imagined average user in mind, and that average user is normally white, male, and an adult. And so I think without getting into specifics about like what parts of platforms sort of reflect that ideology, I think your guys' experience might tell us more about how to answer that question. And so I'll throw it back to you. Like, what do you think that a social media platform that is built for young people would look like? What would it have? What would it include?
I think that honestly it would look like TikTok because I feel like that's like the app for young people. It's fast paced and just a lot of conversation always going on, and anyone can contribute basically. But I also do get a lot out of other platforms that I guess you would say are built for like adults, but maybe not in the same way that adults would. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Gabby, any thoughts you want to add there before I transition us?
No, I think Audrey said it for me. So
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And Joan, I saw expert facilitation. When somebody throws a hard question, you just flip it back around. And Audrey, y'all caught it beautifully. So thank you for that rich conversation all throughout that segment of how I see it. We're going to move to our last and final just question together. And that's just one thing that hasn't come up, or one thing you just want to leave with our listeners, leave with one another. I'm just going to have you go around the space. Maybe we'll start with Monica and just share just one last thing, a takeaway or a piece of fact. Monica, will you mind starting us off?
Sure. One of the things that I think is, also still happening is the pandemic and COVID. And I think as a researcher, being able to delve more into how technology has kind of facilitated those connections or not, particularly among youth, is really something that I'm very interested in. We have asked teens questions about kind of their learning preference. So whether like they'd like to be completely in person or hybrid or completely online. And a majority do want to go back to full-time in person. But I think that there's a lot that there's still left to be unpacked and to understand how this moment, particularly for youth that are coming of age, how the pandemic has impacted their life and how they see technology involved in those conversations.
Thank you, Monica. Joan, one thing you want to leave with us.
Yes. I think something we didn't get to touch on was Adrienne Marie Brown's piece on cancel culture and her really important knowledge questions about like, how do we end cycles of harm online? And so I just want to leave everybody with first that like what we're modeling here, engaging young people in discussions about how they experience platforms, but also into the process of how they're built from the ground up, I feel like is essential to ending cycles of harm online, and also building, digital worlds that are really truly fulfilling.
Thank you, Joan. Audrey.
I thought it was really cool just to see the research behind the things that we're saying because I've never really looked into that before. Especially what they were saying about the statistic, the second one, the one about how like it was basically split between people saying it would be difficult to give up social media and people saying that would be easy. And I just thought that was interesting to see perspectives that were different from mine. So thank you for that.
Beautiful. And Gabby.
Yeah, no, I think for youth, and it's interesting to see, like, I think bigger organizations and like adults trying to like appeal to youth now in certain ways. But I think having like places where youth like right now can like speak freely on their like experience with social media and have like areas where they feel, well, where I feel the most like comfortable is like so important. Even though like some of those spaces, I feel like, you know, we didn't touch too much on like the negativity. We like kind of we touched on it and talked about it. There are a lot of like negative things when it comes to social media, and there are a lot of times where it's kind of like youth don't know when to get off, or like especially I don't know when to like fully detach myself sometimes. But there's like a lot of positives, and I feel like a lot of adults are recognizing those positives rather than making social media into like this whole like big bad type of thing, like, oh my god, you're always on your phone type of thing. And I just like really appreciate that, and I really appreciate kind of these spaces that are now being created for youth to kind of speak together and speak with other people from different mindsets. So just all love.
Audrey, Gabby, Joan, Monica, thank you so much for such a rich conversation on youth digital culture, for your experience, expertise, wisdom, brilliance, grace with one another. And to our audience, we hope that we see you again soon. We hope you enjoy this conversation, and just want to wish everyone a good day. Thanks, y'all.